Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us at Sage 300 Construction and Real Estate and our first class of the day for me, Sage 300 CRE Payroll, preparing for year-end processing. As we go through the class, we've enabled Q&A during this session, so feel free to ask away. We'll have plenty of time at the end of the session for your questions, and we'll bring them up on the screen and talk about any questions you may have. So let's begin. So as we go in, we're going to talk about our table of contents. So we're going to go through our introductions. We're going to review our year-end center, review your setup, kind of take you through the steps to review those. We're talking specifically pays and deducts. Also, we're going to talk about reconciling payroll, your forms preparation, and preparing for the 2026 payroll year. My name is Gaylene Willis, and I've been with Sage for over 26 years. And prior to Sage, I was with the baking industry. Our moderator today is Shar Ferguson. Shar has been with Sage for over 25 years. And prior to Sage, Shar was in the legal industry. I want to make sure everybody bookmarks the Year-End Center. This is a great place to get answers to frequently asked questions, go through your checklist. There's some learning links. There are updates, product announcements, software updates. It's just a great resource for you. We've also included quick links, so product resources, Atrix e-file deadlines, the CRA website for Canada, and the IRS website for US payroll. So such a very, very good site to bookmark. It's really excellent. So are we ready? And when we talk about are we ready, we want to look at our software. Is our software up to date? The most current version is our 25.2. This is our recommended year-end version. Unsure of what version you're currently using? You can find out by opening up any application or the desktop and going to Help and About. Unsure about what has changed in the product? Even if you're not on the latest update, your product documents will show you what has changed in the most current update and what changed in previous updates. So that's under Help, Product Documents, Sage 300 Construction and Real Estate. For this year in, it's going to be version 25 and Release Notes 25.2. So even if you are not on this version, you can still see what's changed in this version. Is your Atrix software up to date? This is really critical. If it's not up to date, you'll see some strange things like the wrong year on the forms when you open up federal e-file and reporting. To find out what version you're on, open up any Atrix report, go to Help, and go to About Tax Forms and E-Filing by Atrix. When we are ready to proceed, we want to test the process. Okay. The best report that I can think of, it's one of my favorites, is the deposit summary for the 2025 year. Always use check dates, 1/1 through 12/31, and you're going to compare this with the totals on the Atrix Prepare Grids. Run your Atrix forms in test mode. Very important. Now, test mode will not save the changes, will not save the reports, but it will help you identify if you have an issue that you need to resolve before printing the actual year-end forms. We want to make sure that we're in balance. We want to make sure we've got great data integrity, and testing the process is a great way to reassure ourselves that we are ready. So we talk about review, and we want to look at specifically pays and deductions. So on this slide, you can see that on the left-hand side, we've got U.S. payroll and U.S. deduction setup. And we're talking about taxes on this slide. So you want to look and see, do we have the proper before employee-employer tax checkboxes selected? Now with most pays, you're not going to have any of those boxes selected. For deductions, you could. So an example of deductions that you might have marked as before employee or employer would be things like a 401k or a health insurance, vision, could be life insurance. You want to review what you have set up in your software prior to running any reports. And it's a good idea to look anyways, just to make sure that you are current in case there have been changes. It also, we want to look at the pay deduction and specifically that retain year-to-date totals checkbox at close year. You'll see this on pays, deducts, and fringes. Now for year-end reporting, we're mostly concerned with pay and deductions. So you wouldn't see retain year-to-date totals at close year on any other pay with the exception of accruals. Accrual pays are used to track dollars and units. They don't affect gross wages and they don't affect taxable or subject to amounts. These are the pays that you might use to report balances or to use for limits in certain formulas for things like vacation, sick, holiday pays. Something where you want to show a balance and you are allowing these values or these units to roll over to the next year. They could be state or government mandated, or they could be company policy. Now, the other thing you want to look at are your deducts. So things like 401k, health insurance, life insurance, those would never be retained at year-to-date totals. The reason being that these are items that are reported on your W-2 form. And the amounts that should show up on that W-2 form should be the amounts that calculated for that reporting year. So you would never have retained year-to-date totals on those types of deductions. An acceptable deduction type where you would have that marked would be your garnishments or your loans, things like this, things that are not going to reach the limit before the year is closed. So it's perfectly acceptable to have retained year-to-date totals at close year for those items because you're going to roll them over to the next year. So very important that we review these settings before we move on. Now with Canadian payroll, you have similar. On the left-hand side, you're going to see the pay and the deduction setup with regard to taxes. So with pays, it's rare that you would have anything marked as exempt from employee or employer. With deductions, it could be very common. It could be things like RRSP, your pension, could be health insurances, things like this. Those you would definitely review and make sure that they're set up correctly. If you have questions about whether these items should be pre-tax or post-tax, check with your tax accountant, your advisor. They're going to know exactly what should be set up. Same thing when it comes the right-hand side screen when it comes to retaining year-to-date totals as US versions. Only have the retained year-to-date totals on those pays that you intend to roll over at the end of the year. So accruals, a perfect example. You're not going to retain totals for wages like a regular pay, a salary pay, reimbursements, things like that. Those are not going to be retained. When it comes to deductions, same thing is true for US. Only those items that have limits that are not going to be reached in that year should be retained. And these are items that are not going to be reported on the T4. Okay, let's get to the next slide. Okay, ACA settings. Now this affects US payroll. And what's important about reviewing your ACA settings is that it contains the default information for your forms. These are the settings that would be for most of your employees. So think majority rules. Okay. They're available under the File Company Settings, Payroll Settings, and ACA Settings. Now, the default coverage code and default safe harbor code, again, majority rules. If you offer health insurance to most or all of your employees, you're going to pick the appropriate code. If most employees elect that coverage, again, you're going to pick the majority rules code. These codes can change, so it's best to become familiar with what the codes are, and the IRS website has great instructions for ACA forms. Now, another point, the default plan share cost that you see here is not what the employee has elected for their coverage. This information is the lowest plan cost for an employee only. Does not include their family, spouse, children. It is only the lowest plan cost they could pay. Doesn't mean they elected that plan. It's necessary that we report the right information and again, the cheapest plan cost that they could pay. Default origin of policy code, this pertains to your company. So the IRS has instructions for different types, A, B, C, D, E. You're going to pick the correct code that corresponds to your company's ACA forms. Now, plan start month, this is not the month in which the employee was hired or was eligible for the insurance. This is your company's plan. In other words, Sage, we begin in January. So January is our plan start month. Your company may begin in March. So you would pick March as your plan start month. So really important. The ACA, they did make slight changes where it's not, you don't have to send a form to the employees now unless they ask for it. Okay, so make sure when you're going through your forms, you save them to a PDF. You will still have to remit them with your government filings, just like anything else. But for this year, you don't have to submit one for the employee. Okay, so let's talk about reconciling payroll. And when I reconcile payroll, I'm talking payroll master file to its transactions. Okay, so the master file are the values stored under the employee setup. And think of those as the accumulators, your current year, current quarter, prior quarter, current month, prior month. So those buckets get populated every time you post a check. Okay, now, my go-to report, one of my favorites, the deposit summary. When I run the deposit summary, I run it from check dates. I ignore the period end dates. They are there for you if you need to use them. But for when we're talking reconciling anything having to do with the tax report, you're going to use check dates, okay? Make sure you use the first check date of the period that you're running the report for through the last check date of the period that you're running the report for. So when I'm running year to date, I'm going to use 1/1 to 12/31. If I was using it to run it for a quarter 1, I'd use 1/1 to 3/31, quarter 2, 4/1 to 6/30, etc. So don't make the mistake of thinking, well, my check date was 1/5, so I'm going to use 1/5, because we all get busy, we get interrupted constantly with everything we do on our day-to-day. You could have a check that was issued, maybe a layoff check that was issued, say 1/4, and if you run at 1/5, you're going to miss that check. So always first day of the reporting period to the last day of the reporting period. Now, I use this report to reconcile to the subject to employee, subject to employer reports that are found under reports tax preparation. Those reports are running off of your master file. Okay, the totals that you see here are going to tie out, or should tie out to the penny, to the totals that are on those subject to reports. There should be no differences. The contribution that you see on the deposit summary is the tax amount. Okay, you're going to see the deposit summary shows you employee as well as employer level taxes. It shows you federal, state, and local taxes. So it is a great report to use when you're trying to reconcile payroll to itself. And if your accounting date is check date, you can also use it to reconcile payroll to general ledger. Okay, now when we're running this report, we want to print it off, we want to have it handy, and we can use it to help us reconcile to those Atrix reports, the federal 941 reports. We're going to run it for each quarter. We're going to run it for the year when we're using it to reconcile to the U.S. federal W-3 report, which is what you get when you run your W-2s. And just a quick note, we all know this, I'm sure, but make sure your 4 quarters or your 941 reports tie out to your federal W-3 report as well. Really important. Now, your federal 940 report is going to show you your FUTA taxes. Now, it's an annual report and won't become available until January of the following year. So the 2025 form will become available in January of 2026. Okay. I also use a deposit summary to reconcile to the quarterly reports, not only the CRE reports, but if you have to report a withholding report for that state, This is also a great report for that. I also have it handy when I'm going through my test mode, running my W-2s. Now remember, always take your W-2 forms through a test process. It's really hard to become familiar with something you only do once a year, right? So take it through test. You can take it through test as many times as you need. You can test with all of your employees or some of your employees. I personally like to test with all of my employees so I can verify the totals that are on this report, tie out to the top of that Atrix Prepare Grid. And you're going to see that for both the Atrix W-2 reports and the Atrix T4 Canadian reports. So you're going to use this report to balance to all of those Atrix reports. Again, I know I can't say this enough. Always use check dates and make sure you use the first date of the reporting period to the last date of the reporting period. Okay. There can be out of balance, right? We've all been there. There could be many causes of an out of balance in payroll. Okay. It's important that we resolve these issues before we go through our final reports. Taking your reports through test mode will help you identify, is there a problem? Okay, so these are just some of the causes of an out of balance. One of them could be data manipulation. Okay, did somebody change the totals on the employee record, that master file? That can be done with certain rights. They can change those totals. Never recommended, but we've seen it happen. You can't change data on a transaction. You can't have access to it to get in there to touch it. Okay. Now, you can void checks, right? So the other point that could be a problem, did we have a void check from a prior year or prior quarter? Did we have a situation maybe where we voided a 2024 check into 2025? Okay. If we had that, we need to fix it, right? Because that 2024 check belongs in 2024. Unless we intend on, filing corrections or amendments, we need that check back in 2024 and not impacting our totals in 2025. Did we have a situation where we refunded a pre-tax deduction? There is a definite process to go through when you're refunding a pre-tax deduction to build the taxable and subject to values back to what they should be. Okay, it's not a matter of just going in and putting in a minus amount on a check for that pre-tax deduction. Okay, so that is something that can cause your taxable and subject to totals to be less than what they should be. Okay, now we have a situation where sometimes we have big data and we might have more than one master file or data folder. Maybe we split executives from field people because of confidentiality purposes. Atrix will allow you to merge totals and run reports out of both of these companies. It is a great way to keep confidentiality, in place, manage it, and merge your filings. However, if we moved an employee, let's say from a field data folder to an executive data folder, and we don't move their checks to the other data folder as well, this is going to cause an out of balance. So if we have a situation where we use multiple files, we want to make sure that that employee, along with their checks, gets moved to the appropriate data folder. So it doesn't happen very often, but we do see this. Okay. So did we have a situation where maybe we didn't close the month by going into task close month, but somebody might have changed the month on the payroll settings? That will cause an issue with some of your master file totals. They'll be out of balance to transactions. The nice thing about transactions is that you can run them by check date, and it's not looking at the month to date, quarter to date, year to date totals. It's looking at just those dates on those transaction records. So if we changed or manipulated the settings, you could have an issue. Now, was payroll closed before the last checks were posted for the reporting year? Sounds pretty, basic. We think, no, I closed the year. But if for some reason we closed the payroll year and then we had to process a check and post it back to the prior year, could be something like third-party sick pay, or maybe we forgot to pay somebody for a holiday, or we had a bonus. If we did that, we're going to have taxes processed onto that check that normally would not have processed. And by that I mean FUTA, SUI, could even be SOCH or SOCH-E for higher compensated person. If that situation happens, we need to fix that issue before we proceed with any of our forms, right? Because our totals could be stated incorrectly on that employee's record. Okay. Did we move payroll checks to a history PRT? Payroll is very, will let you move checks current to history without any problems. Okay, let you do it. But Atrix reports only run off of the current file. So if we did move checks that should have been reported in 2025 to history, Atrix is not going to know it. It's not going to look at history. So if something like that happens, you'll want to call support and we can work to get those checks back in the appropriate current file. Okay, so it's really important. We want to make sure that, we identify any possible out of balance, correct it before proceeding with our final forms. And again, running your files through that test mode will help you identify these issues. Less headaches for us at year end. So forms preparation. Are our forms set up to report accurate information? It's really important. For US, we've got the W-2 form and the payroll settings, ACA settings. For Canada, we've got our T4 format. So let's go take a look. Now, W-2 form changes. For 2025, there is no W-2 format changes. Okay, there is some things that you need to be prepared for US year end. And one of those is going to be regarding overtime premiums. Okay, so again, for 2025, the form has not changed. For 2026, it will. Now, those are not finalized, so we're not even going to worry about those right now. We'll have documentation out there for you next year once we get everything, finalized and verified. For this year, for any overtime premium, we have an option. We can either supply a statement to the employee showing what the overtime premium is, or we can create formulas and put them on box 14 of the W-2 form. And that would just be the premium portion of an overtime pay. It's not the entire amount, only the premium portion. So there, we've got this great knowledge base article, and we do have a link at the end with several great knowledge base articles for you guys to use. But this is something that with payroll, if you have overtime or double time, you'll want to be familiar with. So in forms preparation for US, we're going to go into Tools, Modify Forms, W-2 forms. It is not necessary to create a W-2 form every year. Okay, Atrix retrieves most information from the current check records. Additional information, things like 401k or Roth, health insurance, in-out pay, such as like officer's health insurance, use of company car, those will be added to your form on boxes 12 and boxes 14. And these are master file totals. Okay. The premium portion of overtime double time pays will be either included on box 14 or on a statement. On the sample, we had the state of Alabama who had overtime and double time exempt for the first 6 months of this year. So you'll see that ALOT and ALDT on the format, but at the end of this year, those fields could be removed for those folks who perform payroll in the state of Alabama. Now you'll see a formula that I've got on my sample here, which is going to, I've titled it box 14 prior year OT exemptions amounts. Okay, so that's where as we go through, we can address any questions you have on that. But it's important to familiarize yourself with the knowledge base article so we know what is required to be reported on this form. Okay, if we're unsure of what else could be added to this form and what codes could be added, we have a great help topic in the software. Help topics. Click on index and you can type in either box 12, box 13, or box 14. This will show you the codes that correspond to the circular E. It's great information. And, box 14 and box 12, they are a line that kind of has a separation. So you have the opportunity to put a definition of what's being reported. For box 12, it's going to be these codes, these specific codes. And then you can link it to that item that's going to be reported in that field by using those buttons that you see on the right-hand side: pays, deducts, fringes, or formulas. Same thing is true for box 14, but box 14 will allow you to use the text box. Okay, forms preparation for Canada. So just like with the US W-2 form, it is not necessary to create a T4 form every year. Atrix does retrieve most information from that current PRT, those check records. Additional information that you want reported on this form, your RRSP, which is your pension, your dental insurance, your mileage, use of company car, they must be added to your T4 form. Now, again, if you've reported them in prior years, you don't need to do anything to your form, but it's always a good idea to look at your form, familiarize yourself with what's on there, and just make sure that you've identified you don't need to add any additional information. Just like with the US version, unsure of what you should add in those boxes, you can go to Help Topics, and type in boxes on the T4 forms, and you'll get a great topic that tells you and identifies what are the common items that you might need to add to your forms. We also have a great link here. That's to Revenue Canada, and it will show you what is required if they've made any changes this year. Okay, the T4 slip is the year-end reporting, similar to the W-2 for US payroll. Now, it's going to be very important for our Canadian clients to make sure that they go to the 25.2 year-end version, which was actually released in September of this year. Last year, there was an issue with Revenue Canada publishing two very different sets of instructions when it came to box 26. This would pertain or might have affected you if you worked in multiple provinces. Okay, this had to do with the new taxes added in 2024 for CPP2 and CPP2_E. Okay, so it's going to be very important that if you're a multi-province employer, that you upgrade to the 25.2 to ensure that your totals on box 26 are accurate when it comes to reporting CPP2. Your work province will show the differences for box 26, once somebody reaches that limit for CPP and CPP2 calculates. Okay, so we verified that payroll reconciles to itself. We reviewed and tested the forms process. What's next? So preparing for the year end, are you ready to close the year end? Have you completed your final payroll for 2025? Very important. You're probably already aware of what your last check dates will be in 2025. Make sure you've got everything set up, posted, and you've reconciled not only the December month, but the year. Make sure everything looks good. Before you close the year, review your setup of your pays and deducts. It doesn't hurt to go in there and look at them again and verify everything is correct. Okay. Do we need to retain any year-to-date totals? Or if we've retained year-to-date totals, perhaps maybe an error from prior years, this would be a good time to make sure that those are set up correctly right now. Some things to look at. Do we have any loans, liens, or garnishments with limits that we need to update on the employee record? Remember that those types of deductions that have higher limits that won't be reached in a reporting year would want to have retained year-to-date totals selected on those. Okay, that ensures that the employee won't exceed that limit or limit period that's set up on the employee record. Okay, do we intend to accrue PTO, sick, or vacation units and roll over to the new year? If we do need to select the retained year-to-date totals at close year on the pay setup. Do we need to update any amounts or limits? So specifically, you could have a company policy or a state policy that says, hey, you now need to allow 54 units or 60 units or 80 units to be accrued or to roll over. That would involve reviewing your formulas and making changes to those formulas so that those items are allowed to accrue at a higher value. Do you need to change any limits for 401k? Do you need to look at anything, maybe update uh, eligibility on employee record or modify, eligibility for like say health insurance or 401k? Are you changing anything with regard to a PTO policy where maybe you're going to up the amount of PTO days for an employee? Things like this you want to really review so you can make those changes prior to rolling over into 2026. Make sure you make a backup of your company data folder before you close your year. Very easy to use file tools. You make that backup, that's your little insurance policy, tuck it away someplace safe, that if you do need to restore that backup, you can. Or let's say that maybe you wanted just to have another backup for the end of year of 2025. Some companies will create their own data folder and restore that backup in that data folder, and they may run their reports from that data folder instead of their live data folder. So it's always a good policy to make a backup. It doesn't hurt, takes hardly any time. Okay, now before you process any payroll for 2026, make sure you've closed your payroll year and downloaded and updated your taxes before you process your first payroll for the new year. Now, the payroll tax update will be available the week before Christmas, both US and Canadian. Okay, you can download that file, just don't update it until you are completely finished with 2025. Okay, you don't have to do it when it's ready. You can wait until after you close the year and then download and update those taxes. Verify that the rates are correct and the limits change. Well, we know those taxes are going to change and have, are going to be federal withholding, SOCH, and SOCH-E. The SOCH and SOCH-E limits will have changed. They're going to increase, and the federal withholding tax tables will be updated. So make sure that you are making that backup, being very conscientious about the close year process and downloading taxes, getting ready for the 2026 year. Okay, so let's say we've closed our years, right? One thing that's going to become extremely important is that we have updated our state's employer paid unemployment tax and disability wages. Some of these things are going to be taxes that have what we call an experience rating. So that's not something that we will know about. So we don't provide updates for those types of taxes. About December, around this time of year, keep an eye out for a letter or information, an email from your state that might tell you your new experience rating for the 2026 year and also let you know if the limits have changed. That's not something that will come from us because we don't know what those rates are going to be. It is employer specific. Okay, so make sure you keep an eye on that right now and make a note on your calendar to update those values prior to processing anything in 2026. Okay. After you've closed your year and downloaded, updated your taxes, go look at those taxes. Make sure that the new effective dates are listed and shown. And I'll show you where that is too. We'll get into the software here. If you are in a state which has added new taxes, and a way to tell is going into our documents. We can go in there and look at the payroll taxes and see what taxes have been included on your recent download. If you are in a state that has had new taxes, you'll need to add them to the state tax group. They won't be added automatically. Okay, so make sure that those taxes that are on your state tax group are accurate. Okay, Again, new state taxes that have been added over the course of, for this next year, and we know we're going to have some changes, or that have been added in previous periods, those don't get automatically added to the state tax groups. They'll need to be added manually. For Canadian clients, make sure you modify the personal tax credits for your federal and provincial taxes, and you can do that under the Tools menu and Modify. That way you know you are ready to go for the first payroll of 2026. Okay, so we've closed our year, we've downloaded taxes, and we've processed payroll checks prior to closing the year because we got confused and we got busy and, we get interrupted all the time. No worries. If the status is processed after you've downloaded the taxes and closed the year, simply reprocess. Just reprocess, and any new rates, taxes, limits, things like that will then process onto those checks. And you can look at your process journal and verify that those changes are there. Remember that if we process payroll checks prior to closing the year, we'll be missing FUTA and unemployment, and in some cases, SOCH and SOCH-E. And for higher compensated people, you may see met additional taxes. So if that happens to you, close your year, make sure your taxes are downloaded, and reprocess that payroll. And that will then build the correct taxable and subject to records. Okay. If we've accidentally processed payroll checks prior to downloading taxes, no worries. Just go in, download and update your taxes, and reprocess your payroll. You'll be fine. Okay. If we have printed our first checks of the payroll year and we use a 2025 date and not a 2026 date, you do not need to void those checks. All you need to do is either reprint and use the correct 2026 date, or regenerate your direct deposits using the 2026 date. Just use that reprint or regenerate. If we've accidentally printed checks with the wrong check date, now once they're printed, we can reprint them again. Okay, just like I said, printed, think of it as a do-over, right? Now, if we've printed and posted with the wrong date, you will have to void them. Okay, simply void them, checking the use original check date and accounting date and retaining them as new. Okay, and then all you need to do is process them and print them with the right date. You'll be fine. All right, so this is the Atrix deadline for this year, 2025 reporting. Make sure, if you can, try to get your W-2s, your T-4s submitted earlier, in the month if possible, if at all possible. And make sure that you don't wait until the last day to file. There will be additional fees if you do. You notice that that's 3 p.m. Central Time. So, and that is the last day. And they will charge extra because it takes more work to get that information in and submitted on time. So give yourself some grace and, mark yourself a notice, something, Outlook, calendar, do something to make sure that you get those filings submitted on time. That's one less thing you have to worry about. Okay, so we talked about the Year-End Center. That's a great place to bookmark what you need to find really all sorts of good information, current information, FAQs, links to certain sites. It really is a great resource for you. We've talked about reviewing your setup. Super important when it comes to payroll. Make sure that your deducts, your pays are set up appropriately. Okay. Reconcile payroll. Not only reconcile every month, but reconcile the end of the year as well. Or if you're in a quarter and a month, reconcile the month, quarter, and year, right? But it's really important. It'll give you better confidence to move forward knowing that you're ready to go. Forms preparation, print that deposit summary, go in and compare it to your Atrix reports, and run your reports in test mode with all of your employees. That way you get a good idea of what your totals are, and it helps you identify any errors or problems. If you find one, simply close it go in, make the correction, go back into test mode again. Okay. When you're in test mode, your forms will not be saved. Any changes that you see are not going to write anywhere. Okay. So it's important to make a note of it, identify the problems, go back, fix them, go back in and do test mode again until you get it nice and clean and you're confident in your totals. Prepare for the 2026 year. Make sure you've got, you've reviewed things like limits, limit periods, rollovers for certain accruals. You're going to go in and make sure that, if you need to retain any totals on anything like a garnishment, you've got your new taxes loaded up, you've got your rates for the new year and your limits. Make sure everything is ready to go. I really thank you guys for showing up. We appreciate your time. I know your time is important to you, and I really do appreciate everything, that you guys are here. It makes it very nice. Okay. So I wanted to kind of talk about some upcoming webinars. So tomorrow we've got one where we're focusing on those tax forms. We've got a great AP class coming up on December 9th. So take the time to register, get those things ready to go, mark them on your calendar. There's a server client installation and upgrade. Make sure you go in and register for that session too. These are great year-end sessions to help you prepare for year-end. Your time is important. Okay, so at the end, now I've got hyperlinks on all of these articles so you can click on them and then go right into the knowledge base and get this information. This is something that you'll have available to you as well. All right. So any questions?
Woohoo! Hey, Gaylene, I've got quite the list of questions for you.
Okay.
And I'm going to let you answer them. Yay!
Oh, goody.
So the first thing I'm going to ask is, what about CPP2 on the T4 forms? Is that going to be covered in tomorrow's, or is that something you can quickly answer here?
So CPP2 will show up on your T4 formats. Remember that box 16 is the CPP. CPPA is going to be the CPP2. They will be combined and shown underneath the correct province on box 26. So those totals will be there. They'll be on your forms. Now make sure you're on the 25.2 version. Okay, so if you're there, you are ready to go. Now, if you're multi-province, you'll notice that the work province will show the CPP2. If you're single province, you don't need to worry about that because your forms will not show a box 16, 16A, 26 for every province that you're in.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so now, guess what topic we need to cover? Let's talk about the big, beautiful bill.
Yes. Oh my goodness, right? Oh, yeah. So
we have a question. I downloaded reports on the big, beautiful bill article. Will I need to create a formula in order for overtime to show up in box 14?
You don't need to for this year. So remember that they're looking at the pay IDs of OT and DT. If your pay IDs are not OT and DT, we can easily modify those reports if you choose to print that. There's a report out there that is 1 page per employee. If you choose to give them that, you certainly can, and there's no need to put anything in box 14. For this year, we have an option. We can either do the 1 page per employee report, or we can put it on that W-2 box 14 form.
Perfect. Since the overtime tax credit is a federal tax law, shouldn't Sage be providing a report in order to pull the correct amount? Oh, that's a lot of words really quickly. So basically, aren't the reports out in that big, beautiful bill?
Yes. They sure are. Yep, the reports are there. Now, because we give the client the opportunity to pick their pay ID, we went with the most common OT and DT. You may have something different. You may have 2 or 3, or even call it, OT time or whatever it is. We just need to make sure if you choose to print a statement that we change the formulas on that report to look at your specific pay IDs for overtime and double time. And if you prefer then to just to maybe not work with a statement, but prefer to have those values on box 14, we can certainly work with you to do that as well. There are examples on that knowledge-based article for the formula. So, and remember too, that is only the premium portion of the overtime pay that is reported. It is not the entire amount of the overtime pay.
Perfect. Is there a way to manually enter the deductible OTDT amount in Atrix box 14, assuming we set something up in modify W2 forms box 14?
Boy, you could, but why would you if a formula can do the work for you? Right? So I'm all about work smarter, not harder, right? If at all possible. It's really easy to create those formulas to pull the information for you, and then you don't have to do any manual manipulation at all on the T4 or on the W2 prepare grid. You don't need to do that. So those formulas will do the work for you. What they're doing for an overtime pay is taking the amount multiplied by 0.66667 and then subtracted from the overtime amount, which gives you the premium portion of an overtime pay. For double time, the FSLA says we don't count double time, so you can only report the premium portion of what would be an overtime pay. Now, the other thing too, this was kind of one of those fine lines because we're dealing with the IRS, the Fair Labor Standards. It makes it tough because they are not counting certain situations in which double time is paid. They don't recognize double time at all. So if you're union and your union says you must pay somebody double time, well, that's not what gets reported. It's the overtime portion of that double time pay. So you're kind of walking a fine line. Now, the other thing, we recently modified that on 11.7 because the IRS kind of granted us grace a little bit, saying we know it's going to be tough, do your best kind of a thing to report the accurate amounts. It makes it really, really hard. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they come up with for 2026.
Perfect. Okay, and we still have time, so I'm trying to go as fast as I can. There's a
Don't
lot
worry.
coming in.
Breathe. Yeah, we're good.
Can you confirm for US W2 forms if Atrix gathers most information, W2 information, from the current PR files? Does that mean that items such as 401k, health insurance, etc., must be manually added to the form W2?
Not at all. When I go into my Form W2, I'm going to go here and I'm going to add that information onto my format. So if I go in here, I can pull this information from my master file. So you'll notice here, if I scroll all the way down here, let me get here. I'm trying to think, what do I want to add there? I'll just put X, right? See here if it doesn't want to take it. So it's saying, okay, no, I'm not going to take X. Let me go list. Come on. If I go here, I'm just going to leave that blank for right now, but we would put a code that would correspond to the item that we're adding. You'll notice that I have the option to get to my pays, deducts, fringes, or formulas. So right here, I could go in here and use my list, and this is going to pull the prior year information from, or year-to-date information, depending upon when I'm adding, running my W-2s, from the master file totals. Okay, so let's say I had this one, 401k flat. I could go here and I'll just put a D, and I can put this on this form, and this comes right from my master, and I don't have to have any manually added information on my W2 prepare grid. Okay, same thing over here. Let's say maybe I have officer's health. So I'm just going to put OHLTH, and I'm going to tell it okay. And then over here, I could go to pays and I can pick that officer's health, right? Maybe I've got it set up in here as, it's as an other pay type. It's going to be like an in and out. Let's see if I've got one set up in here. I may have one that I just kind of breezed right over the top of it. But, okay, so let's say it's shareholders or salary officer or whatever. I'll go here. I can just add this information. It comes right from the master, and whatever exists on that employee's record will pull into this field as if they have that item on there. Now, keep in mind, when you run your W-2s, it knows if I run it at the end of 2025, it's going to show me year to date. If I close my year, then it's going to run it off of prior year. Okay. If I use a formula to combine items, like right here, prior year, I need to make sure I label it prior year so I'll know, and I have to think about when I'm going to run my forms. I'm going to run it in January, let's say for 2025. My formula is going to look something like this. I've got a lot of formulas, so don't get scared when I look at this, right? So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to pull box 14, prior year. Okay, so this is my prior year calculation for overtime exemption amounts and my double time. They get combined and added on the form. Okay, so when I'm creating a formula, if I need to use a formula, I need to consider, am I going to run my W-2s for my prior year or my current year? If I use these buttons over here to add information, I don't need to think about that consideration. But if I'm using a formula, I certainly do. It's a great question.
Okay, and that one-page report that you were discussing where it prints one employee per page, that's out on the Big Beautiful Bill knowledge base article, correct?
It sure is. Yep, it sure is. It's downloadable. Let's say 1 page per employee.
And we're getting a lot of questions about, does this apply to triple time, double time? What if we have...
Yeah, no triple time, no double time. So it's tough, right? It's a hard thing because we have to look at the fair labor law, right? Which does not recognize double time or triple time. Even though you as a company may be subject to that payment process because you're union, right? It doesn't count. It's only the premium portion of what would have been an overtime pay. So for double time, it's a formula that would say, look up the prior year overtime amount times 50% times 50%, right? So if I had $50 an hour and they got paid double time and it's $100 an hour, I have to move that back down to what would have been the overtime pay. So $50 an hour times time and a half is 75. $25, that would be the overtime premium. So my double time overtime premium cannot exceed the overtime premium of $25. So they don't make it easy on us. That's for sure when it comes to reporting these amounts. And at least they're giving us grace this year. But yeah, you want to take a look at that article. There are links to the IRS website and Fair Labor. So you'll be able to go in there and take a look at it and, interpret it as best you can. I know sometimes this stuff is really tough, but the key takeaway is they're not going to recognize double time.
If I need help setting up that formula, who should I reach out to?
You can reach out either to your consultant, Expert Services, or you can even open a support ticket if you need to, and I'll walk you through the very basics of that. It's really easy, you guys. The formula is laid out on the knowledge base article. And remember that when you're doing a formula, the ID is going to be shown in quotes. And that article does also discuss that. So whatever my ID is, if it's not OT or DT, then I would go in and replace OT or DT with the exact ID of my overtime or double time.
Okay, we have a question on the upgrade. It says, can we upgrade to version 25.2 in December with reasonable confidence there won't be another software update for year end? I do know that we do have that update one that hasn't been come out yet. So version 25.2 update 1 is going to be the year end version. And then we also have our tax for AP, and we have our tax download that you're going to have to download like normal.
You'll
Uh,
download your tax down for 2026 when you're ready. And
yeah.
remember, that's going to be the week before Christmas. Now, the update that you're speaking about is for AP. It's not for payroll.
And Canada, right? You have to be on
No,
25.2 for Canada
but that
payroll.
was released in September.
Right.
So the year-end update that's out there right now available to you is available right now.
25.2 is the update
Right.
and one is not.
And that's going to be for AP. And I don't even know if it's for Canadian AP. I think it might be more for US AP. And I believe
Okay.
Susan's going to discuss that in her AP class too. So that would be a good class to, you know, register for.
Um, could you please confirm whether garnishment typically retains the year-to-date total? I inherited the setup in our company and it's currently unchecked.
Ah, okay. So there could be a reason that it's unchecked. Let me just kind of show you my setup of my deduction and I'll bring up garnishment and we'll kind of go and look at it. So right here, I'm not marked. Now, I might be not marked because maybe somebody is going to meet the limit in this reporting year. But if it was something that I just, let's say, got a garnishment order for somebody saying he owes $5,000 and it needs to be, $100 a paycheck, then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, oh yeah, retain that year-to-date totals at close year. Then I'm going to go to the employee setup and I'm going to bring up my employee and I'm going to bring up my lovely garnishment and I'll put in my $100. I'm going to make it automatic and calculation frequency every check the limit. So let's say that limit was $5,000. I'm going to put a limit of 5,000, and this is very important, a limit period of no period, meaning that once that employee meets that limit, it stops. Okay. Now, if let's say we've got 3 more checks left of this year and he pays $300 in this year, and I did not have retained year-to-date totals at close year marked, next year he's going to go over that $5,000, right? Because I didn't retain the totals over. So the year-to-date totals at the bucket that's in here on this master file wouldn't show anything, but prior year it would show 300. Okay, my limits are looking at my year-to-date. So I would definitely want to make sure if they're not going to meet that limit, that I make sure I have my garnishment set as retained year-to-date totals at close year. And you could have multiple garnishment deductions set up depending upon what it is. Some people have one set up for like, let's say an IRS levy. Some people could have something set up as, maybe a child support levy, something, something else, or a court order, whatever it may be. You could have multiple garnishments. If it's something that is a large amount that will not be met in the current year, mark that retained year-to-date totals at close year. And when you add it to the employee record, make sure you put in that limit and no period as the limit period so it stops once it hits that limit. Okay, so this is another reason why if we know they're not going to pay that off in 1 year or the rest of the year that you have remaining, make sure you mark that retained year to date so that anything they pay in this year rolls over to the new year. So that year to date total will be accurate. It's a great question.
We have 2 minutes. Can you
Okay,
quickly show where to go into test mode for Atrix?
absolutely. So I'm going to go here, federal e-file and reporting. I love this. And the folks at Atrix are the nicest people too. So they're really, really nice. Let me pull up mine and it's went to a different screen. So let me see here. Come on, you. Should be coming up anytime. There it is. I'm flopping it all the way over. So I'm going to say new report and I'm going to say W2, W3. And of course, this is, I haven't updated mine. You can tell the year is different. I'm going to say next, next, generate. Okay, now this is going to be where it brings in all of my employees that I'm currently processing. So it's gathering up the information. Now, if you have more than one W-2 form or T4 format, you'll see it'll ask you which format do you want to use. So it's not necessary to have more than one. So, make it easy for yourself. Identify which format you're going to use if you have more than one of those. So it's thinking about it. You guys all know sometimes it takes a few moments. And it's going through its process and okay, come on. All right, let me go here. This is what you're going to see. So I'm going to say, I want to test drive with all of my employees. Okay. I'm going to say next, next. Of course, it's going to ask you to go through and look at certain prompts. We're saying, no, I use a single data photo for this company. If I need to change anything in here, I will. Remember that changes also, when you're in the test mode, they don't get saved. Okay. So anything I change here with any regard to any ID or anything like that is not going to be saved. Now you'll notice, of course, it's my test data, so you probably look at it and go, gosh, she's in that many states. No, it's just testing. Okay, so right here, I'm just going to put a bogus account number. Now, this is something that's really interesting. It'll tell us that certain states don't have a requirement for certain taxes. So this is just something telling you, hey, these states have no requirement for the paid family leave on the W-2. So I could say, okay, fine, thank you very much. Do you have any employees who are exempt from any part of Medicare or Social Security? This would be your F1 student visa people. So if you do have somebody who is, make sure you mark yes. Okay, I don't in this data set, so I'm going to say no. So I'm going to hit next. Control number, I don't necessarily need to use that. I'm going to say I'm a 941. I don't have any third-party sick pay, but if I did, I'd want to check this box and make sure that box is checked on the employee record. I'm going to say no truncation. You get lots of choices when you're doing your forms. And so going through the test mode also familiarizes yourself with those prompts for information that you'll see. So it's not something, that's a big surprise when you go in to run your forms.
Will
So
we be
right now,
going over this tomorrow in the?
yes,
Okay,
we will be.
perfect. Because we
Yeah.
are at 2 o'clock. We've actually gone
Oh,
over a little
man.
bit,
Okay,
but
so this is, I just want to take it just really quickly through this
quickly.
so you guys can see it. I'm so sorry. I just want to be kind of thorough and make sure your questions get answered. So here's your prepare grid, right? So if I had my deposit summary, I'd be looking at the totals right across this screen, right here, okay? All the way across, and I can see everything out there that I need to. You can see it's got lots of information. This also will walk you through and check things like retirement plan, right? If I had a 401k on somebody, but I didn't have the retirement plan checkbox, Atrix is going to let me know, hey, you got a problem here. You need to fix this. And all this is a checkbox on the employee entry info tab to get that in there, or actually miscellaneous info tab. So you can see this is kind of walking you through it. You're going to look at everything. I'm going to say, yeah, don't show me this message. Agree. So I'm going, and of course you'll get the splash screen. This is good information, but this is really easy, and it'll tell you over and over, you're in test drive. So see at the top here. So don't be surprised if it doesn't save anything, because it knows we're in test drive. So any questions? I hope we got the majority of your questions answered. We will be back tomorrow a little earlier. I think it's at 11. I'll have to check my schedule. 11 or 10 tomorrow. I think it's 11. But yeah, we'll go through there and go through the forms, kind of get into the weeds a little bit more. But I so appreciate you guys attending our session today. And gosh,
Any
let us know.
questions we didn't get to, we will post those out on the Community Hub announcement page. So keep an eye out on the Community Hub. Make sure you go out there. The announcement page is also where we'll announce when the payroll taxes for 2026 become available, and when update 1 comes available, it will be posted out there. So keep an eye out there for that too. All right, thanks, Gaylene. And I'll go ahead and leave the questions up for about another 30 seconds, and then we'll close out of this training class.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.